Welcome to the Deep Dive. Our mission here is to turn dense source material, research notes, professional transcripts, strategic analyses into knowledge that is immediately applicable, often with some pretty surprising insights.
Exactly. And today, we are really putting theory aside. We're diving into one of the most stressful professional situations you can imagine.
A high-stakes, time-critical travel crisis.
That's right. And we aren't just looking at how to get a new seat on a plane. We are analyzing what is, frankly, a masterclass in professional strategy and advanced communication.
We're focusing on how expert language and, I think, deep systemic knowledge can turn an absolute failure into a success.
Especially when that failure could cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, or in this case, a career-defining commitment.
The scenario is, it's brutal, but it's also really common. A massive international flight cancellation at a major U.S. hub, specifically DFW.
Dallas-Fort Worth, a huge, sprawling airport where anything can go wrong.
And the passenger is Dr. Eleanor Vance, a neurosurgeon. Her objective is completely non-negotiable. She has to deliver a keynote speech at 10 a.m. the following morning in London.
So failure here isn't just an inconvenience. It's a significant professional and reputational disaster. Everything is on the line.
The sources for this deep dive are just fascinating. We have a detailed transcript of the dialogue between Dr. Vance and the airline agent, David.
And this dialogue has been specifically annotated for its use of advanced, what you might call C2 level, English terminology. It's incredible to see the interplay of, clear constraint setting, proactive problem solving, and just emotional intelligence under intense pressure.
So our goal is to dissect every strategic choice, every precise linguistic deployment. We want to show you, the listener, how Dr. Vance didn't just passively accept a bad situation.
No, she actively engineered an outcome that satisfied her critical objective. She took control.
So let's start at the very beginning, at the moment the crisis began, by framing the conflict and establishing the power dynamics.
Let's do it.
Okay, so let's unpack this initial exchange. Dr. Vance approaches the desk. She's just gotten the text message that her flight AA78 to London Heathrow is canceled. She knows she's in a race against the clock.
She does.
So how does she open the conversation to maximize her leverage right from the very first word?
It's a textbook example of establishing power through specificity and status. She doesn't lead with anger or frustration or confusion, which most of us would.
I'd be furious.
Right, me too. But she leads with facts and credentials. She states her name, Dr. Eleanor Vance, which subtly signals high professional status.
A doctor isn't an accident.
Not at all.
Yeah.
Then she provides the flight details, and the PNR, which is that 6-character record locator, is ZY4TL8. This shows she's organized, she's prepared.
And then she delivers the strategic hammer blow.
She does. She says very calmly, I'm a concierge key member.
She doesn't ask if he can help her. She immediately defines the level of help that is required. But let's pause on that. Concierge key.
I have to.
For those who aren't, steeped in the world of airline loyalty programs, this is not just a fancy credit card perk, is it?
Oh, not even close. It's an invitation-only tier. It is the absolute apex status. We really need to spend time here because this is the root of her entire negotiation power.
So it's not about ego then?
Mentioning concierge key status up front is not about ego at all. It's about signaling resource allocation. It immediately communicates to the agent, David, that the cost of not solving this problem is disproportionately high for the airline.
So she's basically saying, I'm not just any passenger, I'm an asset.
A high-value asset, yes, whose recurring business is worth potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars to the company over the years. This isn't a one-off leisure traveler.
So what does that status actually unlock in a crisis like this? I mean, beyond just getting to the front of the line.
It unlocks non-standard waivers and internal resources that are completely invisible to regular passengers. A standard passenger might be told, well, the system only offers you options A, B, or C. A concierge key member means that David, the agent, has the authorization, or can immediately get a manager who has it, to look beyond the standard inventory.
So he can break the rules.
He can bend them, certainly. This includes things like forcing bookings on partner flights that look completely full, accessing reserved inventory blocks that the public system can't see, and crucially, invoking the goodwill budget for significant recovery steps.
Like major upgrades, or even chartering a car service.
Exactly. Things that would be unthinkable for a normal ticket.
I do wonder, though, was she being a bit aggressive by leading with that? Could she have gotten the same result by just being really polite and explaining, I'm a doctor, this is a critical speech?
That's an excellent question. It gets right to the pragmatics of high-stakes communication. And while politeness is absolutely essential, and we see Dr. Vance is perfectly composed throughout this, leading with status is about strategic efficiency.
The efficiency? How so?
It bypasses the need for the agent to slowly escalate the problem up the chain of command. Think about it. He wouldn't have to call his supervisor, who then calls their manager.
Right, she cuts through all that red tape.
By saying concierge key, she essentially tells David, skip the queue, go straight to the operations desk and start looking for authorized solutions, not the standard rebookings.
Yeah.
It sets the parameters for an expert-level interaction immediately.
It streamlines the emergency process.
Precisely. It reframes the whole thing. It's not about entitlement. It's about signaling the urgency and the internal authority level needed to solve the issue right now.
And David's response shows he gets it.
He does. He immediately responds appropriately. He confirms the cancellation was a last-minute mechanical issue. Safety is paramount, the standard protocol line.
And then he offers the automatic system rebooking. This is the first real test of Dr. Vance's strategy, isn't it?
It is, the system's default solution.
And that solution was flight AA50, which would arrive in London at 11:45 p.m. tomorrow night.
Way, way after her 10 a.m. speech.
And of course, it included the typical compensation. A hotel voucher, a meal voucher. This is the airline operating on its default setting. It's treating her like any other stranded passenger.
And here is where Dr. Vance deploys the first really powerful piece of advanced negotiation language. She has to reject this proposal, but do it definitively without introducing emotion that could just cloud the negotiation.
So what does she say?
She says, David, I appreciate the automatic rebooking, but that is entirely unworkable.
Unworkable. Let's dissect that term. Why is that so much more effective than saying, I don't know, that's unacceptable, or that's not going to work for me?
Unworkable is a term of objective logistical fact. When you say something is unacceptable, you're framing the issue subjectively.
You're talking about your feelings.
Exactly. You are expressing a personal feeling of disappointment. And the agent could, theoretically, argue about what constitutes acceptable service. But when you use unworkable, especially in a professional context, you are stating a definitive logistical constraint. It implies the solution fails to integrate with the known non-negotiable parameters of the situation.
So it shifts the whole focus from customer service to operational logistics. It becomes a puzzle to solve, not a complaint to handle.
Exactly right. It forces David to recognize that the automatic booking is a non-starter from a practical systems integration standpoint. It opens the door to solution engineering rather than, defensive customer service management.
It's almost like a term from contract law or project management.
It is. If a proposed solution is unworkable, it means it cannot be executed or implemented, period. This is a cold professional assessment, and it forces David to move from level 1 customer support to level 3 crisis intervention in a single word.
I love that distinction. Logistical fact versus an emotional complaint. And David's response confirms he understood the gravity.
He did. He used that informal yet very empathetic idiom. He says, I see. Okay, that certainly puts you in a bind.
And that phrase, in a bind, it's a great moment of human connection, isn't it?
It is. It acknowledges the complexity and the inescapable difficulty of her situation. It shows he recognizes the severity isn't just a matter of waiting another day for her. She's truly trapped by an external, immovable force.
Her deadline.
Her deadline.
And speaking of that immovable force, Dr. Vance then clearly defines that non-negotiable deadline. She doesn't just say, I need to get there faster.
No, she's incredibly specific. She states the constraint. Keynote speech at 10 a.m. London time. Therefore, arrival must be by 7 a.m. at the absolute latest.
This is the strategic core of the whole interaction. She hasn't just stated her destination. She has defined the metrics of success for any replacement itinerary.
But let's analyze that 7 a.m. buffer for a second. Why 7 a.m.? A 3-hour padding window for a neurosurgeon.
Right. Most people would probably aim for, 9 a.m. for a 10 a.m. event and just hope for the best.
And that is the difference between hoping and strategic planning. The 7 a.m. arrival time is a calculated risk assessment. It factors in multiple points of potential systemic failure once she's on the ground at Heathrow.
So we need to break down that buffer to really understand its importance.
We do.
Okay, so 3 hours, landing at 7 a.m. for a 10 a.m. event. What's the first thing that eats into that time?
Well, Heathrow is massive, so let's allocate a good 30 minutes just for deplanning and walking, and it can be a long walk, to the immigration hall.
Okay, so she's in the terminal at 7 to 8:30.
Then, especially for international travel, we have to allocate a conservative 45 minutes for customs and immigration clearance. Even if she has a fast-track pass, things can get backed up.
So that's an hour and 15 minutes gone already.
And we haven't even gotten to bags. Let's say 30 minutes for baggage collection. And for a professional conference, she almost certainly checked a bag. That's 1 hour and 45 minutes of processing time just inside the airport.
Wow. So even with a perfect on-time landing at 7 a.m., she's just leaving the terminal around 8:45 a.m.
Exactly. And now she has to get to the venue in London. Depending on where that keynote is, say central London or maybe the Excel Center, traffic, especially during morning rush hour, can be highly unpredictable.
A total nightmare.
So she needs at least 45 minutes to an hour for transportation. That includes finding a taxi or getting on the Heathrow Express and then maybe a cab from Paddington.
So if she leaves the airport at 8:45 and it takes an hour to get to the venue, she's walking in the door at 9:45 a.m.
For a 10 a.m. speech. That gives her 15 minutes to find the restroom, check her slides, get a glass of water, and walk her to the stage.
And that's the absolute best case scenario.
That's the best case. That 3-hour buffer is what protects her against a 45-minute flight delay on the transatlantic leg, or a major traffic snarl on the M4, or a security alert that closes a terminal for 20 minutes.
By establishing 7 a.m. as the absolute latest, she gave David a concrete, hard boundary that ensured success, not just minimal compliance.
And for the listener, this is so crucial. Define your success parameters with padding, not just the bare minimum requirements.
The moment she set that 7 a.m. boundary, the search for David changed, didn't it? It went from a customer service recovery mission to a precise logistical puzzle with zero tolerance for even minor delays. That's powerful.
It's a complete reframing of the task.
So we've established the non-negotiable deadline and the necessary status. But how did Dr. Vance move from just rejecting the bad solution to actively engineering a good one?
She transitions immediately into collaboration. This is a key part of advanced negotiation. She recognizes that David is just looking at a standard menu of options on his screen.
She needs to give him new ingredients.
She needs to inject new variables. Her suggestion is specific. She says, we need to think beyond direct flights. What about routing me through another hub? Philadelphia, Chicago, New York? I am amenable to any solution that gets me into Heathrow.
She's essentially pre-authorizing him to be creative.
Yeah.
She removes the pressure of needing to find a single perfect flight and opens up the complex multi-leg solution path.
Yes. And David, he's following protocol. He checks the standard American Airlines hub options first.
And what did they find?
Chicago is a non-starter. Any option through there would be a missed connection. JFK is possible, but it results in a 9 a.m. arrival.
Which is 2 hours past her 7 a.m. buffer.
And that connection is very tight. She'd be running through the terminal.
And this is where Dr. Vance demonstrates the next layer of foresight, not just rejecting the solution, but assessing the risk within the solution itself.
Yes, she uses that powerful term when discussing the tight JFK connection. She says, that would exacerbate the situation if there were any further delays.
To exacerbate. Let's pull that apart. That's not a word you hear in casual conversation every day.
No, it means to make a problem or a bad situation worse. It is often used in medical or, highly professional contexts to describe a deterioration. By using it, she is telling David, the tight connection itself is an independent risk factor.
She's performing a high-level risk analysis for him in real time.
That's a great way to put it. She's saying, we are in this crisis because of one failure. If we choose a contingency plan that has a high probability of failure itself due to minimal buffer, we are just compounding the error.
We're doubling our risk.
Absolutely. This shows she is operating several levels above the agent, who is just focusing on the numbers on the screen, the 9 a.m. arrival time. Dr. Vance is focusing on the probability of mission success.
And her language reinforces her authority as a meticulous planner. When a high-status customer uses clinical professional language like exacerbates, it compels the agent to take that risk assessment seriously.
It's the vocabulary of risk management. But then comes the true strategic pivot, the moment she moves from analyzing risk to providing the breakthrough solution.
The partner network strategy.
This is the zenith of her expertise. She shifts the entire negotiation from the limitations of AA's own inventory to the vast resources of the entire global alliance.
What does she say exactly?
She says, what about your One World partners? Have you checked British Airways availability out of any East Coast gateways? BA-116 out of JFK, perhaps? Or their flights from Boston?
Wow. So she is not waiting for David to remember his training manual. She is writing his playbook for him on the spot.
She knows the structure of the alliance, that American Airlines and British Airways are closely linked through oneworld. This is knowledge most passengers, even high-status ones, just don't have or don't think to use.
They just focus on the airline that failed them.
Exactly. Dr. Vance demonstrates comprehensive systemic knowledge. She knows that AA agents can, with authorization, force bookings on BA inventory, even if those seats are not showing up as immediately bookable on AA's standard search tools.
So it's the difference between checking the public market and accessing the closed strategic market.
A perfect analogy. And crucially, she doesn't just mention British Airways in general. She names a specific flight, BA-116 out of JFK.
Which means she had clearly done her homework. She'd researched the viable alternatives before she even got to the desk, or maybe while she was waiting in line.
That level of preparation saves critical time. And David immediately understands the implications of her suggestion. His role changes completely in that moment.
And what does he say?
He says, "That's an excellent suggestion, Dr. Vance. Let me liaise with our One World partner desk."
To liaise with. This is one of the most important professional verbs in this whole transcript. We really need to dissect what he means when he says he will liaise.
It's a formal corporate verb. It implies structured cooperation across organizational boundaries. It is not just, I'm going to call another person.
It's more official than that.
Much more. It means establishing official communication and working together to achieve a shared objective that crosses jurisdictional lines. In this case, the border between American Airlines operational control and British Airways inventory control.
So by using that word liaise, David is confirming two things. One, her suggestion requires a high-level specialized channel of communication.
Yes.
And two, he is formally committing AA's resources to coordinate with a separate sovereign entity, which is BA.
It carries significant professional weight because it implies accountability for the success of that cross-organizational effort. David is taking ownership of the coordination challenge.
So her high status, plus her very specific suggestion, has forced him into a higher plane of operation.
It has. It required him to activate resources reserved only for critical, high-value problems. If she had just said, "Can you call British Airways?" it would have sounded like a desperate plea.
It would have had no authority.
None. But by suggesting the One World partners and using the term liaise, the conversation maintains its strategic, professional footing. She gave him both the language and the pathway to the solution.
So she didn't just create the need for a solution, she provided the blueprint for how to get it.
That proactive guidance is why the negotiation moved forward so rapidly, despite the initial unworkable failure. It shows a mastery, not just of language, but of the operational structure of the industry she's interacting with.
It's a really powerful lesson for listeners in any field. When you run into a roadblock, don't just complain about the wall. Find the specific gate or the specialized contact within the broader system and use the precise language needed to compel access.
That's it, exactly.
So David steps away. He liaises with the partner desk, and he returns with an initial proposal, and he calls it a viable contingency plan.
That term, again, it elevates the solution above a simple rebooking.
How so?
Contingency plan signifies structure. It's a formal, vetted backup plan designed for a potential future event, like the failure of her original flight. It's not arbitrary. It suggests the plan has been authorized, likely with approval from a supervisor, specifically because of her status and critical nature of her objective.
It makes the solution sound robust, less likely to fail.
Exactly. Less prone to some last-minute problem.
Let's look at the actual plan he proposes. AA-104 from DFW to JFK, departing in 90 minutes, so they're moving fast.
Very fast.
And that connects to BA-178 from JFK to LHR. But this is where the human element, the stress, and a communication error come into the picture.
David is clearly operating at a maximum stress level. I mean, the stakes are so high. And he immediately makes a critical verbal error.
He misreads the arrival time.
He does. He reads the arrival time off his system, or misreads it as 11:20 a.m. London time.
Which is catastrophic. It's over an hour too late for the 10 a.m. keynote. All this work for nothing.
And Dr. Vance has to reject this almost perfect solution simply because the timing is wrong. She maintains that composed clinical tone, but she has to be firm.
She says 11:20 a.m., that's far too late. My speech is at 10 a.m. That doesn't work.
And this is the moment where David, who has been operating at a really high cognitive load, starts to unravel just a little bit. We can see the pressure mounting.
He starts to fumble.
He struggles, he apologizes profusely, and he openly acknowledges his own stress. He actually says, I misspoke. My system is being slow. The stress of the situation is getting to me.
This moment where the agent admits vulnerability, it's so revealing. He's confirming that the complexity of the task, the concierge key status, the non-standard booking, the partner liaison, it's overwhelming his ability to process information clearly.
Absolutely. Now, the natural response from a stressed passenger at this point would be to just lose it.
Raise their voice, blame David, demand to speak to a supervisor.
Which would likely cause even more delays and just make things worse. But Dr. Vance demonstrates the absolute highest level of professional emotional intelligence. She doesn't attack him.
She stabilizes him.
She takes control not through aggression, but through calm leadership.
What was her exact de-escalation phrase? It was brilliant.
She says, David, take a breath. Let's look at the screen together. Is there not an earlier BA flight from JFK BA 116?
It's a masterful move. She acknowledges his panic, take a breath. She validates his effort, and then immediately provides a precise, actionable instruction. Look for BA 116.
She is essentially becoming the co-pilot in the control room. She knows he has the access and the authority, but she provides the navigation system that he momentarily lost.
That level of composure in the face of what looks like another failure is just incredibly rare.
Well, think of it in terms of other high-stakes environments, a surgeon in an operating room or an air traffic controller. When the person in the hot seat makes an error, you don't criticize them. You issue a clear, focused instruction to regain control.
And that's what she did. Her calmness redirected his overwhelmed attention back to the facts she already knew.
A fact she had in her back pocket from her own research. BA 116 existed, and it was earlier. She trusted her preparation and knowledge of the system more than she trusted the agent's stressed, real-time search capabilities.
Proactive communication turned into leadership.
And it works, instantly. David recomposes himself. He immediately validates her suggestion and explains his previous error. He says he was focused on a flight that had confirmed award space, which is the easier option for him to book.
The path of least resistance.
But now, thanks to her guidance and his existing authority, he says, you are absolutely right, Dr. Vance. I apologize. Let me force this.
That is the operational climax of the whole story. It confirms that he is now using his highest level of authority, leveraging that concierge key waiver mechanism to secure inventory that the system typically holds back.
He is not just reserving a seat. He is overriding standard inventory control for a partner airline. It's a huge move.
That's the second liaison with the partner desk pays off.
It does. They secure the booking on BA 116. The final workable itinerary is confirmed. AA 104 from DFW to JFK, followed by BA 116 from JFK to LHR.
And what was the critical confirmed arrival time for that flight, BA 116?
The confirmed arrival time was 9 a.m. London time.
That is precisely the narrow margin she strategically padded for. It wasn't her ideal 7 a.m. buffer, but it was still technically feasible for a 10 a.m. keynote.
Objective achieved. She acknowledges this pragmatism. She doesn't complain about losing her 2-hour buffer. She just confirms this will give you just enough time. Success achieved by a narrow but defined margin.
And Agent David, he closes the negotiation with a really necessary demonstration of service recovery. He provides that gesture of goodwill.
Right. He upgrades her to flagship first on the DFW to JFK segment and confirms her Club World, which is business class, seat on British Airways.
And this gesture is so crucial. In high-stakes service recovery, the upgrade is not a gift, is it? It's a calculated tool for relationship repair.
It is. David knows that while he fixed the logistical problem, the experience was still highly stressful and consumed her valuable time. The upgrade acknowledges the immense value of her time and her high status, solidifying the relationship and preventing future defection.
It ensures she leaves feeling not just successful, but valued. So if we step back now, the entire exchange is a textbook example of high-stakes negotiation. Let's synthesize Dr. Vance's strategic communication into those 3 pillars we identified: clarity, proactivity, and composure.
It's a perfect integration of deep system knowledge with advanced proficiency terminology, what we might call strategic pragmatics.
Let's focus first on clarity and specificity.
Okay. Her language from the very beginning eliminated any ambiguity. She defined the problem using that objective term, unworkable.
Which immediately shut down emotional debate and forced a logistical response.
Exactly. Then she established the exact parameters of success, that 7 a.m. arrival deadline, complete with the strategic padding we discussed. She made sure David knew exactly what a successful outcome looked like, rather than relying on him to guess.
So that crystal clarity prevented any further wasted effort on routes that just weren't going to work.
None. Secondly, proactivity. She didn't just sit back and rely on David to stumble onto the best solution.
No, she actively led him there.
Her suggestions were complete game changers. Suggesting alternate hubs was a start, but then, most critically, immediately bringing up the One World partnership and naming BA 116. That demonstrated she was a highly informed partner in this, not just a frustrated client.
She used her status and her system knowledge to push for a complex, non-standard authorization path.
A path that David would likely not have defaulted to if he was just left alone with his standard search tools. This level of informed intervention drastically accelerates the solution timeline.
And finally, composure. This was tested so intensely during David's moment of confusion about the arrival time.
This is often the hardest skill to maintain when the stakes are high. Her calm, clinical redirection, take a breath, let's look at the screen together, was a display of leadership under duress.
She maintained her firmness on the deadline without ever attacking the person who was trying to find the solution.
She demonstrated that her focus was purely on the outcome. That enabled David to recover his own concentration and successfully force the BA 116 option. This emotional regulation is perhaps the most advanced skill she demonstrated.
It proves that advanced communication isn't just about using big words. It's about using the right words to manage both the information flow and the relationship under extreme duress.
And we have to give a deeper analysis of Agent David's performance, too. This was a dual success.
Absolutely.
David was navigating a complex, multi-system problem while dealing with an intimidatingly high-status customer on an impossible deadline. His response was also an example of advanced proficiency in customer service.
He started with that crucial empathy, validating her difficulty with, that puts you in a bind.
And he consistently used professional terminology. We heard viable, liaise, and protecting you. This professional vocabulary maintained a high standard for the interaction, even when the situation was dissolving into chaos and he was personally getting overwhelmed.
More importantly, he showed the persistence to use the resources his job entitled him to. He didn't quit when the direct solutions failed.
No, he leveraged that concierge key access to force this solution with the partner carrier. He demonstrated accountability for the success of that complex multi-party effort.
And the final gesture of goodwill, the upgrade and the vouchers, is a key insight into organizational risk management. It's a cost-benefit analysis, really.
Oh, absolutely. The cost of a first-class seat upgrade is minimal. It's nothing compared to the cost of losing a concierge key member for life.
Not to mention the potential fallout if a world-renowned neurosurgeon misses her keynote because of an airline failure.
David secured organizational loyalty, and he ensured the final impression she had was one of success and validation. He even explicitly provided vouchers for dinner and for her transportation in London, ensuring that even the logistical details outside the airport were handled.
Confirming they found a workable path forward.
That's right. The entire dialogue concludes so perfectly with Dr. Vance's final summary, acknowledging the dual effort. She says, "I appreciate your persistence and professionalism. You've handled this extremely well. You turned a potentially disastrous situation around. Thank you."
It's a clean, professional closure. Respect on both sides.
This exchange is truly a microcosm of strategic professional interaction. By combining deep, specific knowledge like knowing the alliance structures and flight numbers with advanced, precise language, unworkable, exacerbate contingency plan, you drastically increase the likelihood of achieving your critical objective, even when the system is failing around you.
So this deep dive into just a single high-stakes dialogue has really underscored the incredible power of strategic, advanced communication.
It has.
Those professional terms, unworkable, liaise with, contingency plan, they're not just academic flourishes. They are tools.
They are tools that define expectations, manage risk, and compel access to complex, specialized organizational resources, especially when you are defining your non-negotiable goal.
And the lesson extends so far beyond the airport.
Oh, completely. Expertise isn't just about possessing knowledge, it's about deploying it proactively. Dr. Vance didn't wait for the airline to fix her problem. She used her knowledge of the system, the One World Alliance, and her status to guide the agent toward the only viable solution path.
And this is applicable whether you are, say, negotiating a software contract or managing a critical supply chain disruption.
Or defending a project deadline in a big meeting.
If you are approaching any high-stakes interaction, you have to channel your inner Dr. Vance. Know your absolute, non-negotiable constraints. Know the system you are operating within better than the person across the table from you.
And maintain your composure when the other side makes an error. That calmness is what saves the negotiation.
We saw how Dr. Vance leveraged her status and her knowledge of the system to push for the non-standard solution. And this raises an important question for you, the listener, to take away and apply immediately in your own professional life.
What internal structures, specialized departments, or partnership alliances exist in your professional ecosystem, whether that's your company, your industry, or your network, that you could proactively suggest leveraging the next time a critical project is in a bind?
What is your non-negotiable deadline? And how will you use precise language to communicate it when the automatic default solution is simply unworkable?
Professional leverage is built through a combination of systemic knowledge and precise language. Use that combination to engineer your next success.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into high-stakes strategic communication. We hope this framework gives you the tools you need to navigate your next professional crisis.
Until next time. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. This is where we take a complicated stack of sources and really try to distill them into the essential knowledge you need.
And not just the knowledge, but the strategic insights and I think the linguistic tools you can actually apply in the real world.
Yeah, exactly. And today we are dissecting a high-stakes, high-leverage situation that, I mean, let's be honest, it's a scenario that nearly every traveler dreads.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
We're talking about that moment of systemic failure when you're dealing with lost luggage.
Right. So we're picking up the narrative thread of Dr. Eleanor Vance. If you were with us for our last deep dive, you'll remember she managed to secure a really, really complex rerouting to London.
She did. She was delivering a critical keynote address, and she managed to bypass one just massive logistical hurdle to get there.
So she made it. She got to London Heathrow, LHR, she performed her professional duties, everything went great. But now the system has thrown its most irritating challenge at her.
Her checked baggage is gone. Vanished.
And our sources document the dialogue that follows between Dr. Vance and the airline's resolution office. It's 24 hours after the problem was first reported, and the file reference is LHR AA12568.
And we really have to stress, this is not just an inconvenience for her. It's not about not having a toothbrush.
No.
The stakes are immense. That bag contains not only all her professional attire for the meeting she has after the conference, but, and this is the critical part, proprietary post-conference research materials.
So this is a time-sensitive, high-value problem.
A huge one.
Yeah.
It threatens her professional capacity to do her job. And the standard, the automated, we're looking into it resolution system is just, it's not adequate for this level of emergency.
Which brings us to our mission for today. We are going to analyze Dr. Vance's blueprint for assertive communication.
It's really a strategic toolkit.
It is a toolkit of high-level English that allows her to cut through the bureaucracy, to bypass all those standard scripted responses, and actually force a high-level resolution.
This is all about using precision language. It's about demonstrating expertise and asserting control rather than, just venting or expressing frustration, which is what most of us would do.
I'd be yelling, let's be honest.
Me too. But she's not. We're specifically looking at how she uses this advanced vocabulary, what you might call C2 level strategic language, to move from getting an inadequate update from a frontline agent.
An agent named Sarah.
Right, Sarah. And she moves from that conversation to securing a personal, substantive commitment from a supervisor, Mr. Harrison. It's a remarkable study in applied leverage.
Okay, so to really understand how she pulls this off, we need to first understand the core vocabulary, the language that signals her intentions right from the start. So let's look at the 5 key expressions that really form the structural backbone of this entire negotiation. Okay, let's unpack this strategic toolkit because these aren't just, polite words or fancy jargon.
No, not at all. These are terms designed to categorize and diagnose systemic failure. They establish Dr. Vance's credibility from the very first sentence.
So they're like signposts.
They are. They act as signposts. When an airline representative hears these terms used correctly, they immediately recognize they're dealing with an informed customer.
Someone who gets it.
Someone who understands policy, who understands process, and who probably understands the corporate structure better than they do.
Okay, so our first key phrase, and this one might be the most powerful, diagnostically speaking, is to fall through the cracks. What is it about this particular idiom that makes it so effective when you're dealing with a huge corporation?
Well, I think the power here is in its neutrality and its scope.
Neutrality, how so?
When Dr. Vance states her bag fell through the cracks, she is doing two things at the same time.
Okay.
First, she is articulating a very precise diagnosis of a systemic fault. She isn't saying it was stolen or that it was lost because of malice. She's saying it was overlooked.
Right, by a flawed process. It's a system failure, not a person failure.
Exactly. And that's the second, and I think the most crucial part.
Mm-hmm.
She's removing the impulse for the frontline agent, Sarah, to become defensive.
That's a vital distinction, isn't it? It completely moves the conversation away from emotional blame, you lost my bag, and into this technical policy territory of your system failed.
Precisely. By diagnosing this system, Dr. Vance kind of positions herself and the agent on the same side of the table, both looking at this flawed system together.
That's smart.
The source example really nails this. It says, with so many new employees starting at once, it's easy for some of their training needs to fall through the cracks. It implies that complexity and high volume are the real antagonists here.
Which in airline operations, they often are.
It's almost always the case. If she had just said, "You forgot my bag," the agent would be immediately forced to defend her team, her colleagues.
But falling through the cracks establishes the complexity of the rerouting process as the real cause.
And it signals sophistication. Any seasoned professional, anyone who's worked in a large organization, knows that things are complex. They know that systemic failures are often the culprit, not individual incompetence.
Okay, so moving on from the diagnosis to the practical consequences of that failure, the next phrase is interim expenses. Why this specific term? Why not emergency money or I need compensation for my purchases?
The precision of the word interim is what makes it so high level.
What does it signal?
It means temporary, or more technically, relating to the intervening period. So by using interim expenses, Dr. Vance frames the costs for her essential replacements, the suit, the toiletries, the basic professional items she needs, as strictly temporary costs.
Costs that exist only because the airline failed to deliver her property.
Yes, it establishes the nature of her financial claim within the airline's own framework. This is not a negotiation for damages or compensation for emotional distress.
It's a claim for costs incurred during that intervening period, until the service contract, which is the delivery of her luggage, is fulfilled.
And that framing is so critical. Airline liability, especially for international travel, is often governed by these big international treaties, like the Montreal Convention. And while the specific policy details can vary, the underlying concept is always structured around the carrier's liability for, and this is the key, immediate, reasonable, and temporary costs that are necessitated by their failure.
So using the term interim expenses shows she is thinking like a policy analyst.
Exactly. Not just an angry consumer. It streamlines the whole reimbursement process because she's speaking their language.
It makes the request entirely procedural, which I imagine minimizes the friction with the agent.
Absolutely.
Now, the third phrase, to initiate a trace, seems like basic airline jargon. You hear it all the time. So why is understanding and using this phrase strategically so important?
Because it allows Dr. Vance to challenge the sufficiency of the action. When Sarah, the agent, says, "We have initiated a trace," what she means is she has entered the necessary data into the global standard system. That system is called World Tracer.
World Tracer. Okay, can you give us a quick technical background on what that system actually is? Is it like a GPS for bags?
I wish. No, World Tracer is a massive, standardized global database. It's shared by hundreds of airlines and ground handling companies all over the world. You can think of it as the central nervous system for baggage tracing.
Okay, so it's a matching system.
It's a matching system. When a bag is reported lost, an agent enters a detailed report color, type, brand, contents into World Tracer. If any other airport or airline in the world finds that bag, they scan the tag, enter the details, and the system automatically tries to match the profiles.
So initiating a trace is really just the administrative act of entering the data. It's step one.
It's the bare minimum. And Dr. Vance knows this, so she can use the airline's own terminology to show that she knows the difference between passive data entry, initiating the trace, and active human intervention.
Which is what she's about to demand.
It's exactly what she's going to demand. She can challenge the sufficiency of the first action because she knows the systemic complexity of her case requires the second one.
This leads us directly to the fourth phrase, which feels like it dramatically shifts the dynamic of the conversation. To be at an impasse.
It does. An impasse is a formal, almost procedural statement. It means that a negotiation or a process has reached a deadlock, a point where no forward progress is possible under the current conditions.
So when Dr. Vance declares, "It seems we are at an impasse," what is she signaling?
She is signaling the formal termination of the conversation at Sarah's level of authority. She's saying, you and I can go no further.
I have to say, I worry that could sound too aggressive. If I'm an agent on the phone and a customer declares an impasse, it just sounds like, aggressive corporate jargon.
Right.
How does Dr. Vance make sure this is seen as a procedural demand and not just a threat?
That's a great question. And the answer is all in the context and the timing. She uses the word impasse after she has exhausted all the standard remedies. She's already asked for updates on the trace, she's probed about a manual search, and she's hit a wall on all of them. So she uses it before she makes the procedural demand to escalate. She is defining the structural constraint of the situation.
So she's implicitly saying, I get it, Sarah. I acknowledge your personal limitations. But since your policies are preventing a resolution, we are therefore procedurally deadlocked.
Precisely. It's a measured, objective assessment of the failure of the current level of authority. It's not personal.
It's brilliant. It perfectly sets the stage for the final term, which is the procedural resolution she wants, to escalate the matter.
This is the operational demand that follows the impasse. To escalate just means taking the issue to a higher level of authority.
But the way she uses it is key.
Absolutely. By using this phrase, Dr. Vance shows she understands the organizational chart. She knows that policy constraints are usually only broken by managers, which means she needs to move up the chain of command.
So it's not an emotional outburst like, I want to talk to your boss.
God, no. It's a reasoned procedural request for the appropriate level of authority required to implement the non-standard solutions she's already identified are necessary.
This is truly a blueprint. These terms fall through the cracks: interim expenses, understanding initiate trace, recognizing an impasse, and then requesting to escalate the matter. They're all markers of high-level competence.
They are.
They signal that Dr. Vance is ready to engage with the system, not as, a victim, but as strategic equal.
They convert that raw emotional frustration into precise, actionable demands that force the organization to stop and take notice.
Okay, so let's apply this toolkit to the actual dialogue now. The scene is set. Dr. Vance is called the Central Baggage Resolution Office. Sarah, the agent, has answered.
Right. She's retrieved the file, LHRAA 12568, and she's offered the standard comforting script.
What does that sound like?
Sarah confirms the basic facts. The bag was tagged at DFW, its last scan was at JFK, and it missed the connecting British Airways flight to London. Then she gives the crucial but empty reassurance. We have initiated a trace.
Standard, policy-bound, and as you said, utterly insufficient 24 hours later.
Completely.
And Dr. Vance immediately counters this polite brush-off. Our sources show she uses this very measured, high-level language. She says, with all due respect, that is the exact same information I was given 24 hours ago.
And then the key phrase, a trace being initiated is no longer a sufficient update.
That's critical. She immediately refuses the low-friction response they want to give her. She challenges the automated system and demands the human element.
And she asks the precise, crucial question that the system is designed to avoid. Who at JFK is physically looking for this bag?
Wow.
And then she follows up. I require proactive steps beyond the automated World Tracer system. She's calling out the system by name.
And here she deploys that first piece of strategic language we discussed. She connects the failure back to its source. She says her baggage fell through the cracks, specifically during the complex rerouting at DFW.
This diagnosis is so sharp. She's saying, look, the initial error was generated because of the previous high-complexity problem I already helped you solve. This isn't just a random event. It's a known secondary consequence of your previous failure.
That raises the stakes considerably.
Of course, it links this new problem to an existing, already complicated customer history file. She's telling them, you already know my case is unusual.
And Sarah, who is, constrained by her policy manual, cannot meet this demand for a manual search.
No, she defaults to the script. She says something like, ma'am, we cannot manually search the entire facility. The electronic trace is designed to be the most efficient process. This is the first deadlock.
The first impasse, even if she doesn't use the word yet.
Exactly. And Dr. Vance immediately recognizes that Sarah is hitting a policy wall. The frontline agent simply cannot authorize the dedicated resources, the hours of labor, the shift supervisor oversight that are required to physically look through a massive baggage warehouse at JFK.
So she knows pushing on the location information any further is futile at this level.
Yes, and this strategic recognition is the cue for the pivot. It's brilliant.
So she executes the strategic shift. Since she can't get the location information she needs right now, she pivots entirely to the financial pressure point. She shifts the whole focus to interim expenses.
This pivot is a perfect example of assertive communication. It's like if door A is locked, you immediately test door B.
And door B is the one the agent can open.
It's the one she has some authority over. Dr. Vance immediately uses her status to frame the request. She doesn't just ask for money. She demands to know the exact reimbursement limit for a concierge key member in this specific international situation.
Okay, let's pause right there because we keep mentioning concierge key. For listeners who aren't, steeped in airline loyalty program policy, what exactly is concierge key and why does this status have such immediate quantifiable weight?
Concierge key is American Airlines' highest, invite-only, unpublished elite status. You can't just earn it by flying a certain number of miles like other statuses.
It's a secret level.
It's basically a secret level. It's often reserved for the top maybe 0.1% of travelers. We're talking CEOs of major corporations, key decision makers on huge corporate travel accounts, or people whose companies spend millions, sometimes tens of millions, annually with the airline.
So this is not just about getting to board the plane faster or a free drink.
Not at all.
It signals to the airline that losing this specific customer is a massive financial risk.
Absolutely. The airline's entire risk assessment calculus changes immediately. When Dr. Vance invokes her concierge key status, Sarah knows she's dealing with a customer who likely has a dedicated support team, whose complaints are logged at a much higher organizational level, and who has immense leverage over future corporate contracts.
The financial consequences of a poor resolution just went from, a few $100s to potentially millions.
Exponentially higher than for a standard platinum or even an executive platinum traveler.
Okay, so with that immense pressure now on the table, what was Sarah's initial default offer for those interim expenses?
Sarah provided the standard traveler policy. She says the allowance is $150 per day for the first 3 days.
And that's the common baseline policy, right? It's intended for a general traveler to just go out and buy some basic toiletries and a change of clothes.
Yes. And Dr. Vance immediately rejects it, armed with both her knowledge of policy and, crucially, the context of her travel.
What did she say?
She calls it wholly inadequate. And she anchors her counter-argument in reality. She says, a single presentable business suit in London costs significantly more than that.
She doesn't anchor the cost in luxury, like a designer brand. She anchors it in professional necessity.
Yes, a necessity required for her business class travel and the high-level meetings she is there to conduct. It's a reasonable and justifiable expense.
The genius of this move is that she forced Sarah to look beyond the first page of the policy manual. She is effectively saying, you are reading me the economy class policy. I demand you check the policy that is specific to my elite tier and my international business class ticket.
And that status pressure immediately pays off. Sarah, recognizing the huge risk of alienating concierge key member over $100, checks the specific policy details. And she is forced to correct herself. The reimbursement is authorized up to $250 a day.
That is an immediate 66% increase in her daily allowance.
A 66% increase secured purely through specific knowledge of her status leverage and a clear professional articulation of her needs.
It's an immediate, quantifiable win.
And that's so crucial. It validates Dr. Vance's authority in the negotiation. It signals to Sarah that any future attempts at standard scripting are going to fail. And most importantly, it secures the necessary funds for Dr. Vance to continue her professional duties without taking on undue financial strain.
So the financial lever successfully established her dominance in the exchange, even though the core problem, the location of the bag, was still completely unsolved.
It bought her time and established her credibility. Now she can circle back to the real issue.
Right. So having secured that financial leverage and completely established her credibility, Dr. Vance now returns to the core unresolved problem.
And this pivot back is just as calculated as the pivot away. She's making sure that the win on the interim expenses doesn't distract from the primary mission, which is finding the bag.
She doesn't waste time with small talk or saying thank you.
No. She immediately transitions by stating, now back to the bag. It seems we are at an impasse.
There's the word.
There's the word. This marks the strategic moment where she stops asking for information and starts demanding action.
Declaring an impasse is, as you said, a rhetorical challenge. It officially defines the current interaction as blocked, which necessitates moving the process forward.
And moving forward means escalation.
Right. The logic is crystal clear. If the system, World Tracer, has failed, and the agent, Sarah, is constrained by policy from authorizing the non-standard search,
then the system requires intervention from a higher authority to introduce those non-standard solutions. The impasse makes the demand for escalation feel purely procedural, not emotional.
So she immediately requests two very specific types of contact information, which again shows she understands the organizational structure. What are those two requests?
The first is a request for a direct contact number for a baggage supervisor at JFK.
Trying to go straight to the source.
Exactly. This is the crucial test of Sarah's policy limits. Dr. Vance knows that if she can talk directly to JFK operations, she can bypass the central office entirely and get things done much faster.
And how does Sarah respond to that?
Sarah immediately denies the request, citing policy. She says something like, "We are not authorized to give out direct numbers for our ground operations staff."
Which is a rigid, non-negotiable wall.
A wall that Dr. Vance absolutely expected to hit. But it serves a purpose. It confirms on the record that the agent is completely constrained and cannot provide the help required.
So that leads to her second request, which is the formal procedural demand.
The big one. She asks for the name and direct contact information for the manager in the Central Baggage Resolution Office, the person who supervises Sarah.
This is the essential step for a successful escalation.
It is. And the genius of Dr. Vance's approach here is that she doesn't just stop at the request. She doesn't just say, "Get me your manager." She immediately provides the rationale for why a manager is necessary.
She gives a sophisticated analysis of corporate authority. Tell us more about what she says.
She starts by acknowledging that Sarah is constrained by internal policies.
Which is a de-escalation tactic in itself.
It absolutely is. It
Yeah.
maintains that professional distance. It removes any personal friction. She's saying, this isn't your fault, Sarah. Then she defines the manager's unique authority. She says a manager can approve non-standard solutions, like authorizing the dedicated manual search she needs.
And she adds another one.
Yes. Critically, a manager can liaise directly with their counterpart at the other airline, at British Airways at JFK.
That level of detail is just impressive. She is essentially briefing the agent on why her boss is needed. She's providing the business case for the escalation before the boss is even on the line.
It guarantees that when Sarah goes to her manager, she can say, "I have a concierge key member on the line who needs you to authorize a manual search and contact BA at JFK." The manager knows precisely what's expected and why standard procedures won't work.
It pre-justifies the request for exceptional action.
It does. And then she backs all of this up with the defining diagnosis of the problem. This is the rhetorical knockout punch.
What's the line?
She says, "Since my bag's last scan was before the transfer to BA, this is now a multi-airline issue, and it requires a higher level of intervention."
That phrase completely reframes the problem.
It transforms the missing bag from a simple American Airlines mistake into a complex intercompany coordination challenge at one of the world's busiest airport hubs.
And frontline agents are not authorized to do that. They can't just call up a rival airline and start demanding things.
No way. But supervisors and managers are. Their job is to handle exceptions and interdepartmental or intercompany problems. Dr. Vance is using the structural complexity of the problem to logically necessitate the intervention of higher authority.
That structural analysis is just undeniable. It's airtight. It compels Sarah to comply.
Sarah has no choice. Despite any, understandable reluctance or frustration, she has to initiate contact with her supervisor, Mr. Harrison.
This flawless execution, using procedural language to identify the limits, declare the impasse, and then provide a structural justification for the next level of management.
That's what separates successful escalation from just, complaining loudly. She didn't ask for a manager. She dictated the terms of the escalation to come.
So Mr. Harrison, the supervisor, comes onto the line, and right away we see the value of a successful escalation.
Immediately. The entire tone of the conversation shifts from policy defense, which is what Sarah was doing, to proactive problem solving, which is what Mr. Harrison does.
How does he start the conversation?
He starts with a professional recognition of fault. He apologizes for the unacceptable delay and the conflicting information. This personal touch immediately signals that he is operating outside the automated script.
He's taking personal ownership of the problem.
Yes, he's acknowledging the severity of the situation right from the get-go.
And he doesn't waste time repeating the standard trace information, I assume.
No, he immediately validates Dr. Zance's previous analysis and outlines 3 specific substantive actions he is authorizing. These are the non-standard solutions she basically told Sarah he would have to provide.
What's the first one?
The first is formalizing the prioritization within the World Tracer system. He says he is escalating this to a priority trace.
So what does that actually mean on the back end? In the system itself, is it just like a different color flag on the file?
It's much more than that. In World Tracer, changing the status to priority flags the file for specialized human oversight. It usually means that specific high-level individuals, airport operations managers, regional baggage specialists, are automatically notified and are now required to manually check the file status and input updates on a regular basis, say, every few hours.
So it pulls the file out of the huge automated pool of lost bags and places it directly under a dedicated human monitoring workflow.
That's it exactly. It transitions from just being a database entry into a manual task for high-level staff members.
And the second action?
The second action directly addresses Dr. Vance's multi-airline diagnosis. He says he will personally contact the operations manager at JFK.
So he's committing to that intercarrier coordination.
Yes. The very specific solution she articulated in her justification for the escalation. He's closing the loop on the known systemic failure point, the handover to British Airways.
And the third action is the most powerful one, I think, in establishing trust and accountability.
Without a doubt. He gives his word, a personal commitment, to provide a substantive update within the next 3 hours.
Let's zoom in on that word substantive, because that feels like the defining difference between a successful resolution and just another polite brush off.
It really is.
A standard update, as we established, is often just an automated notification confirming the trace is still active. It's basically an email saying, no news yet.
Right.
So what is the difference with a substantive update?
A substantive update promises a result that is directly related to the actions he just committed to. Mr. Harrison is not promising an email from World Tracer. He is promising a direct phone call from him, personally.
A call detailing the outcome of the priority trace.
And the result of his conversation with the JFK operations manager. The update has to convey new information, or at the very least confirmation that a specific high-level task has been completed.
So this demonstrates that Dr. Vance successfully secured personal accountability. She didn't just want the system to work. She wanted a human being with authority to own her problem. And that promise of a personal phone call within a short, defined time frame, 3 hours, that's the metric of her success.
It's the ultimate goal of her entire assertive strategy. She secured immediate, personalized attention from someone who has the authority to approve the precise, non-standard solutions she identified from the very beginning.
And Dr. Vance, in turn, affirms the outcome with equal precision. She concludes the exchange by saying that is precisely the level of engagement this situation requires.
No excess emotion, no further demands. She got the resolution structure she needed, and she acknowledged it. The transaction is complete.
The outcome is just crystal clear. Her sophisticated, well-articulated strategy paid off entirely.
She transformed a systemic failure into a manageable, structured, and prioritized project for the airline's senior staff. She used language as leverage to dictate the terms of her own recovery.
The remarkable case study, she didn't just tell them to hurry up. She identified the bottleneck, she defined the authority needed to solve it, and then she provided the procedural justification for the supervisor to override standard operating procedures to get it done. #outro. Wow, what a deep dive into the power of precise language. We've seen Dr. Vance move step by step from diagnosing the problem,
The baggage falling through the cracks.
all the way to demanding the specific outcome, which was the formal escalation of the matter to secure that priority trace.
And I think we've really established that sophisticated language it's the currency of complex resolution.
That's a great way to put it.
Dr. Vance used these structural terms to identify core systemic flaws, and that allowed her to bypass the frontline gatekeepers and engage directly with the decision makers who could actually approve the non-standard solutions she needed.
The value of this type of high-level articulation is its precision. I mean, it removes all the ambiguity from the situation, and it replaces emotional appeal with cold, procedural logic.
Exactly. She knew that simply being frustrated or angry wasn't going to work. But identifying the problem as a multi-airline issue that had reached an impasse was the key that unlocked the entire organization.
This really is a powerful blueprint for assertive communication for anyone listening.
It is. It teaches you that when you're dealing with these large faceless systems, your objective has to be clear. Identify the organizational block, define the authority level needed to remove that block, and then use precise language to justify transferring the issue to that authority.
Now, we spent our time detailing the successful tactics of Dr. Vance, which were, just brilliant.
They were.
But before we finish, here's a provocative thought, something for you to mull over as you integrate the strategic blueprint into your own toolkit.
Yes. We analyzed how Dr. Vance's strategy hinged on these critical leverage points. Her elite status as a concierge key member, her international business class ticket, and her detailed knowledge of the higher tier policies.
Right, the policies which mandated that 66% increase in her interim expenses. She knew the rules.
She knew the rules.
So the provocative thought is this. What assumptions does her strategy make about the power dynamics in that conversation? Specifically, the willingness of the corporation to prioritize her because of her immense financial value to them.
And more importantly, how might those assumptions fundamentally change the tactics for someone starting from a lower tier? Say, a first-time economy traveler with no elite status at all.
What happens then?
Well, if that financial lever is severely limited or, non-existent, the weight of the escalation has to rely almost entirely on the structural logic.
So the person has to lean even harder on the diagnosis, the falling through the cracks, the multi-airline issue, and the procedural necessity of the impasse.
Exactly. And it raises a really interesting question. Does structural logic alone guarantee a swift and successful escalation when the financial incentive for the company to resolve the issue is, when it's diminished?
It forces you, the listener, to consider the weight that's actually behind your words. The language can remain the same, but the effort required to make the system actually listen might shift dramatically based on the leverage.
It's a key point to consider when you're tailoring your own assertive strategy to your specific position in that system.
Until next time, keep thinking critically about the systems you engage with.
And remember, the precision language is the key to mastering them.
Welcome back to The Deep Dive. Today, we are strapping in for a really high-altitude analysis of a very, very grounded problem.
And that is catastrophic corporate failure.
Exactly. But we're not talking about a market crash or, some big factory explosion. We are stepping right into the intensely pressurized world of corporate crisis management.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all following a, frankly, humiliating and very high-profile baggage failure at American Airlines.
And this is key. It wasn't just any lost bag. This involved a passenger, a Dr. Vance, who is, let's just say, deeply influential.
Right.
And that profile, that specific passenger, is what turns what might have been a routine service complaint, something quickly resolved with a standard reimbursement, into a full-blown executive-level emergency.
It's the kind of thing that gets VPs pulled into weekend meetings.
Absolutely. The sheer gravity of who Dr. Vance is forced the leadership to finally confront a systemic failure that, they had previously just sort of accepted as an acceptable cost of doing business.
And what's so fascinating for us and for you listening is that we have access to the most critical document that comes out of a crisis like this.
The postmortem.
The internal postmortem meeting. This is between Catherine, who's the VP of Customer Experience, and Mark, the Director of Airport Operations for the Americas. This isn't theoretical. This is how decisions are made, in the fire.
Our mission today is surgical. We're going to use this confidential corporate meeting as a kind of learning laboratory.
Okay.
We want to extract the key analytical and strategic concepts. And really, it's the precise, specific language they use to diagnose these massive systemic failures and then formulate high-stakes strategic solutions, all under enormous pressure.
So this source material, it's really a rare window into the C-suite vocabulary of, risk mitigation?
That's a perfect way to put it.
So you should think of this deep dive as your shortcut to understanding that vocabulary and, maybe more importantly, the critical thinking that drives this kind of high-level corporate decision-making.
Right. So when you hear these terms used in a boardroom or, read them in a report, You won't just know the dictionary definition.
You'll understand the weight.
You'll understand the weight of their implication, the years of deferred maintenance, and the millions of dollars in potential risk that a single one of these phrases can represent.
Okay, so let's get into it. Before we actually join Catherine and Mark in that meeting, we need to set the stage.
Yes, we need to arm you, the listener, with the specialized vocabulary they use to dissect this crisis. It's really a framework. There are 5 key terms they use to understand the systemic issues they uncovered.
And I want to stress, this isn't just jargon.
No, not at all.
Jargon is meant to obscure things, right?
Yeah.
This specialized language actually illuminates the problem.
It's analytical weaponry. It's used to identify, to measure, and then ultimately to mitigate risk.
Okay, so let's start with the name of the meeting itself, the post-mortem.
Right. So in common usage, post-mortem makes you think of a morgue cause of death.
Yeah, a bit grim.
A little bit. But in a business context, and especially in fields like IT or engineering or operations, a post-mortem is a highly structured process. It's a meeting that happens after a project, or in this case, a failure has concluded.
And the goal.
The purpose is purely analytical. You want to analyze success, failure, and this is the most important part, the lessons learned for the future. It's a debriefing.
So it's a rigorous debriefing session. But how is that different from, say, a standard internal audit or a formal investigation? They sound similar.
That distinction is absolutely critical. An audit is generally backward-looking. It's often focused on compliance, financial accountability, maybe even punitive measures if there's fraud or negligence.
Children's head is going to roll.
Potentially.
Yeah.
A post-mortem, on the other hand, is forward-looking. And here's the key. It is non-punitive.
Non-punitive. Okay, that's important.
It's everything. The goal is explicitly not about assigning individual blame. It's not about finding who to fire. The goal is to identify process failure so you can fix the system.
Because if employees are afraid, they're going to get blamed.
They won't talk. They won't reveal the true points of systemic vulnerability, which completely defeats the entire purpose of the exercise. You get a cover-up, not a solution.
That makes perfect sense. If you really want to fix the system, you have to create a safe space for people to admit where and how the system broke down.
Precisely.
Okay, next term. This is a foundational one from systems design, and it sounds like it's really the root cause of this particular crisis, the single point of failure, or SPOF.
SPOF. Yeah, this concept is taken directly from fault-tolerant engineering. A single point of failure is any single component or part of a system. And this can be a piece of hardware, a software module, or even a specific human role that if it fails,
The whole thing goes down.
the entire system stops working. It's the one domino that topples all the others, the essential piece of the puzzle.
Why is this such a powerful concept in the corporate world? It seems so simple, but it must be tied directly to efficiency, right? That's why these things exist.
Exactly. Identifying and eliminating these SPOFs is foundational for building what they call resilient or robust processes. But here's the critical strategic dilemma. Often, a SPOF exists because eliminating it costs time and money.
It's cheaper to have one weak link.
In the short term, yes. Think about it. Automation is often implemented to improve efficiency by reducing headcount. But if that automation relies on one single, unverified digital handoff between two systems, that handoff becomes the SPOF. Companies are implicitly trading resilience for immediate cost savings.
Until something like the Dr. Vance incident happens.
And then it forces them to completely reevaluate that risk. Suddenly the cost of not fixing it is much, much higher.
It's that classic trade-off between speed and security, or cost and resilience. Okay, our third term describes a major organizational hazard that just compounded the SPOF here, to be siloed.
Right. When departments or teams are siloed, it means they're operating in total isolation. They're like organizational islands.
And what does that mean in practice?
Critically, it means they are not sharing information. They are not collaborating effectively. And very often, they're using non-integrated proprietary systems that can't talk to each other.
So why are silos so dangerous, especially in a complex operation like an airline transfer?
Because the customer experience, something like a baggage transfer, is almost never contained within a single department. It's a journey. It crosses booking, gate operations, ramp staff, IT, and in this specific case, a partner airline. So if each of those entities has its own system that doesn't talk to the next one, and maybe they were built 20 years apart or use different APIs, that handoff from one silo to the next becomes the danger zone.
The space between the silos.
That's where things fall. Silos force the customer experience to navigate these invisible walls, and that leads to massive inefficiency and, as we're about to see, critical data loss.
So silos are basically organizational walls. And they're often fortified by things like outdated technology and, I imagine, competing departmental budgets and priorities.
You've hit it exactly. Moving on, our next term is the adjective prohibitive.
Okay.
If a cost or an effort is deemed prohibitive, it means it is so high, either financially or operationally, that it prevents a necessary, usually strategic action from happening.
This sounds like where the concept moves from just describing a problem to justifying inaction.
That's it. It's a justification. When corporate leadership decides that the risk of not fixing the system is less than the immediate cost of the fix, they will label that fix prohibitive.
But let's challenge that for a moment. Isn't labeling something prohibitive often just a polite way of saying the company prioritizes short-term quarterly budget targets over long-term strategic integrity?
It's often exactly that. It's what accountants would call a deferred cost.
Right.
The mechanism of failure here is often the budget cycle itself.
How so?
A director, like Mark, proposes a multi-million-dollar system integration project. The CFO looks at it and says, our current failure rate is 0.01%, and that expense will hurt this quarter's earnings. Defer it.
So they kick the can down the road.
And that cost only stops being prohibitive the day after a catastrophic failure occurs. Because then, suddenly, the cost of inaction becomes demonstrably higher than the cost of implementation. It's a decision based on accepted risk, right up until the moment that risk materializes in a very public, very embarrassing way.
That reframing deferred cost versus prohibitive cost, that feels key to understanding the executive psychology during a crisis.
Absolutely.
And that leads to our final term, a key strategic action they must take now to streamline a process.
To streamline something is to make it demonstrably more efficient and effective. Pretty straightforward.
But how do you do it?
Well, it's usually achieved by simplifying the steps, removing unnecessary bureaucracy or redundant checks, and improving the overall workflow. So when you hear them talk about streamlining, they're really talking about optimization. And that's typically measured by things like speed, accuracy, and cost reduction.
So in this case, they need to reduce the unnecessary friction in the baggage handoff process, the friction that caused Dr. Vance's bag to just vanish into that black hole.
That's the goal.
Perfect. Okay, so with those 5 tools, postmortem, SPOF, siloed, prohibitive, and streamline, we now have the rigorous lens we need to analyze this corporate crisis. Let's join Catherine and Mark for Section 1, the anatomy of a perfect storm.
So we step into the, you can imagine, quiet, serious setting of this postmortem. Catherine, the VP of Customer Experience, sets the tone immediately. She's clearly not there to listen to excuses.
Right.
She expresses deep concern over the preliminary findings in the report she's read. And the tension isn't just because a bag was lost. It's because the failure exposed a known strategic vulnerability to one of the most powerful and valuable customers they serve.
So Mark, the director of airport ops, he has to lead the initial diagnosis. And he frames the event as a perfect storm of failures.
And that framing is a crucial device. It's a strategic way to start the conversation because it immediately separates the uncontrollable elements from the controllable and therefore culpable operational flaws.
So what's the uncontrollable part?
Mark clarifies that the initial mechanical cancellation of the flight was unavoidable. This is the force majeure, the act of God, the uncontrollable variable that started this whole chain reaction. An engine fails, a flight gets canceled. That's a logistical problem, sure, but it's not a systemic failure of competence.
Okay, so that's bucket 1, unavoidable. But then there's the second category.
The subsequent baggage fiasco.
And Mark admits very clearly that this was entirely preventable.
And that's the pivot. This is the point where accountability shifts sharply. They are no longer discussing external factors. They are now discussing internal operational flaws that they could have and absolutely should have controlled.
So the focus narrows immediately onto the parts of the system that AA design and owns themselves.
And Catherine, the VP, she just cuts right to the heart of it. She pinpoints the core operational issue, a communication breakdown during the handoff to their One World partner, British Airways.
And she says the bag seemed to have vanished into a black hole.
I want to pause on that term, black hole. It's so vivid, but it's also highly specific corporate language. It describes a critical data loss where all tracking just ends, and as a result, responsibility gets shirked. No one owns the problem because no one can see it.
And Mark then has to elaborate on the specific sequence of failure, which is just Crucial for understanding exactly where the system broke down during what I think you called an IROP.
Yes, we need to define that. IROP, or irregular operation. That's the industry term for any disruption to a scheduled flight, whether mechanical failure, air traffic control, you name it.
Okay.
IROPs are the true test of an airline's operational resilience. Why? Because they require manual intervention and cross-system communication, which is precisely where automated processes designed for smooth, normal days so often fail.
And this bag was subject to a manual rewrote because of the IROP. So let's trace the failure step by step because it reveals the systemic flaw in just painful detail.
Okay. Step 1. The bag was initially scanned at JFK. The system knows it's there. So far, so good.
Step 2. The rerouting was finalized in the AA system. So digitally, a new plan exists.
Step 3, and this is critical. The manual retagging process at DFW worked. A human being successfully intervened. The physical sticker with the new flight info went on the bag correctly.
So this proves the ground staff actually followed the physical protocol. The human part worked.
The human part worked. The physical redirection was successful. But the failure, as it so often is, was purely digital. Step 4. The digital instruction, the message that should have confirmed that physical action, did not correctly transfer from American system to British Airways system at JFK.
That's the moment. That is the single point of failure right there.
It's the interoperability issue we defined earlier. So then step 5, a ground staff system, which is operating independently and, it's only confirming its own output, showed the bag is transferred.
So on their screen, it looks like success. The problem is solved.
It cleared A's digital responsibility. Checkbox ticked. But then you have the final catastrophic step.
BA's system never received the instruction to load the bag. So even though the physical bag might have been sitting right there on the tarmac with the right physical tag on it, it's invisible to the people who need to load it.
Exactly. The operational systems were completely out of sync. There was no digital handshake.
And this is the crux of the problem. Mark says it clearly in the transcript. The two systems weren't speaking the same language.
And we can immediately diagnose this technical failure using our framework. This is a textbook example of the systems being siloed. They are separate digital entities. They were likely built on different legacy platforms. They probably use different communication protocols, or maybe there's just an outdated, brittle API connector that failed during the high-stress environment of the IROP.
And the danger isn't just that they're separate, it's the digital deception. The AA system provided a digital confirmation, a mission accomplished, that completely masked the physical and digital failure on the DA side.
That reliance on the originating system's successful outbound report, without requiring an immediate, verifiable inbound receipt from the partner airline, that is a huge, huge vulnerability.
And this leads Catherine Wright to the definitive diagnosis of the SPOF.
Yes. She states that the current process for these high-priority cross-airline transfers relies on two separate siloed systems to align perfectly every single time with no human oversight.
That lack of human verification on a critical high-risk handoff is the classic single point of failure.
It is. The entire system was dependent on a perfect digital conversation that they knew from experience was often imperfect.
But why? Why was that human verification layer removed, or maybe never even installed in the first place? It had to be for efficiency, right? To avoid the cost of an extra ramp agent just checking a tag.
Precisely. The removal of human oversight is always a calculated efficiency gain. You automate to reduce labor costs. It looks great on a spreadsheet.
But then Mark reveals the historical context, and this elevates the failure from a simple operational mistake to a massive strategic oversight.
He acknowledges that this interoperability issue, this inability of the two systems to communicate seamlessly, it hadn't just been flagged. It had been flagged for years.
For years. So this changes the entire equation. This was not a surprise. This was a known risk.
It was a known risk.
Yeah.
And the corrective action, a fully integrated, real-time baggage tracking system across all One World partners, had always been deemed prohibitive.
There's that word again.
There's that word. The corporate leadership had made a conscious, explicit decision that the multi-billion-dollar cost of a global system rebuild was just too high to justify, based on the relatively low frequency of high-profile baggage loss.
So they basically accepted that they would occasionally lose a bag and just pay out the standard, $1,500 claim?
Exactly. That was the calculation.
That financial judgment is so crucial. Until a highly visible, influential crisis occurs, the cost of prevention is often viewed as prohibitive. It's a classic example of what developers call technical debt.
Yes. The cost of fixing past mistakes And that debt just accumulates interest over time until it triggers a crisis.
And once that crisis hits, the cost of reaction, both financial and, more importantly, reputational, completely changes the math.
The initial calculation was losing a few thousand bags a year is cheaper than spending $1 billion. The problem is, they didn't factor in the catastrophic cost of losing the right bag.
Which brings us right into Section 2, reputational damage and the necessity of action. The focus shifts entirely from the technical specs to the business imperatives.
Catherine immediately shifts the focus. She links that perceived prohibitive cost of a system overhaul directly to the now equally prohibitive cost of reputational damage that the Dr. Vance incident has triggered.
She's comparing two massive costs.
It's a direct comparison of two massive but differently weighted costs. The concrete cost of a new IT system versus the more abstract but potentially much larger cost of lost brand equity.
And we really need to understand what we can call the Dr. Vance multiplier here. The cost of fixing the system might be billions, but the cost of looking incompetent to the entire flying public, especially the most influential members, can be measured in brand equity and future bookings that could dwarf a single system overhaul.
That's the core insight of the meeting. Dr. Vance is not just one lost customer. She is an influential figure whose account of this incompetence will be shared widely, within high-value professional and social circles. And these are the circles that are disproportionately responsible for the airline's premium revenue.
So the immediate operational failure is compounded by what we might call reputational drag.
Reputational drag, I like that. It's a constant slow drain on trust and loyalty that's caused by a single highly visible failure. The consequences amplified far, far beyond one lost suitcase.
The failure basically proved that the long-deferred, prohibitive cost of fixing the system was in fact less than the cost of managing the fallout from this one crisis.
Exactly. The company was willing to absorb the cost of minor random failures, but they were demonstrably unprepared for the cost of a reputational catastrophe. The failure was so public, so embarrassing, that it shattered their previous risk model.
So the timeline for a solution shifts instantly. Mark had been talking about a huge systemic problem interoperability across the entire One World Alliance. That might take years to solve through traditional capital projects.
But Catherine just shuts that planning horizon down immediately.
She says, not in 5 years, now.
That shows the executive recognition that the failure has reached a critical threshold. It requires immediate, fast-tracked intervention. They have to plug the gap that led to this crisis, and they have to do it this quarter.
Because they simply cannot afford another high-profile incident while the big strategic fix is slowly designed and debated.
The pressure is intense on Mark to produce a rapid fix that doesn't, blow the entire annual budget.
And he's ready for it. He confirms his team is already working on an interim fix, one designed specifically to streamline the process for their most valuable customers.
Notice the precise language there. They aren't lying to themselves. It's an interim fix, a patch. They are not pretending this solves the deep underlying strategic problem of the siloed systems.
They're just solving the immediate high-risk operational gap affecting the customers who matter most to their quarterly earnings and their reputation.
This transition from recognizing a massive systemic failure to developing an immediate targeted fix, that is the core of effective crisis management. They can't rebuild the global system in 3 months.
But they can deploy a targeted patch to mitigate the highest future risks. They are being forced to be pragmatic.
And that pragmatism leads us directly into Section 3, where we analyze the proposed fix, the tactical patch to a strategic problem.
Okay, let's get into the details of this tactical patch. It's a very targeted solution focused squarely on protecting the people who matter most to the airline's bottom line and its reputation.
Precisely. The new protocol is specifically designed for the absolute top-tier passengers. We're talking concierge key and 5-star service members who are undergoing an irregular operation, an IROP.
So not for everybody.
Not for everybody, not even close. These are the customers whose loyalty and massive annual spending are most crucial and whose negative feedback on social media or in their networks carries the greatest viral weight. This is a cold, calculated, targeted risk mitigation strategy.
So what is the mechanism of this fix? It's kind of elegant in its simplicity, but also deeply ironic.
How so?
Because it brings back the human element that was removed for efficiency in the first place, which is what allowed the system to become the SPOF.
That's a fantastic point. So here's how it works. When a manual cross-airline baggage reroute is initiated for one of these specific high-tier passengers, it now automatically triggers a high-priority digital alert.
And where does that alert go?
It goes to a dedicated individual, the Special Systems Coordinator at the connecting hub.
This is a new role then, a new headcount, a whole new layer of protection built specifically to bypass the flawed, siloed digital process. What is this coordinator's sole responsibility?
Their sole responsibility is manual verification. To get the alert, they must physically go and locate the bag, and then they verify with their own eyes in a manual scan that it has been loaded onto the correct connecting flight before that flight departs.
They are the manual override, the check valve, the human firewall.
That's it. This is a critical addition. Where the digital systems failed, A's system claiming transferred while BA's system remained completely silent, the coordinator steps in to provide critical, verifiable physical proof.
So they are literally plugging the gap that was created by the interoperability issue. It's an admission that for these high-stakes handoffs, automation alone is simply insufficient.
It is a very expensive admission, though. We have to look at the cost implications of this.
Right.
Mark confirms this requires additional headcount for these coordinator roles at all the major hubs, DFW, JFK, LAX, Chicago. And while that sounds like a significant increase in operational labor cost, he immediately justifies it.
And how does he frame that cost justification?
He says the cost of these new coordinator roles is only a fraction of the cost of a full system overhaul. The rationale is crystal clear.
They're trading a small, manageable, immediate increase in labor costs now
for preventing a potentially catastrophic, prohibitive crisis cost later. It's a calculated investment in reputation management, and it's specifically tailored to protect their highest value revenue stream.
And they're being careful in how they roll it out. The plan is to pilot the tactical fix at JFK, DFW, and ORD within the next quarter.
And that's standard corporate practice. You test the new process at high-volume critical hubs before you try to scale it company-wide. They need to refine the coordinator's workflow and, importantly, measure the reduction in lost baggage incidents for that specific tier of customer.
That's a key point. They will be measuring success not against the entire operational failure rate.
No, but against the targeted failure rate of Concierge Key and 5-star members. If they eliminate those high-profile incidents, the patch is considered a success, regardless of what happens to the standard economy bags in the system.
And this is where the analysis in the meeting really hits its peak. Catherine accepts the plan, but her acceptance comes with a very precise, very analytical label that defines both the scope and the limitation of this fix.
She calls it a tactical solution to a strategic problem.
That is the highest level of business acumen and, frankly, self-awareness.
It is. She recognizes they haven't solved the core interoperability issue, the strategic problem, that still exists for the general passenger population. The digital SPOF is still there, lurking in the system.
But the immediate problem, the reputational fire, is being put out. They're buying themselves time. But what are the long-term dangers of labeling a fix as tactical and then just relying on it?
The long-term danger is tactical dependency. It's another form of that technical debt we talked about. Every tactical patch is a temporary bandage. If they rely on this manual coordinator process for years and years, the pressure to solve the underlying strategic problem, the siloed systems, it just fades away.
And the tactical solution itself can become inefficient over time.
Exactly. It adds cost and complexity to the overall operation, it masks the fundamental vulnerability, and it compounds operational rigidity. You risk turning a temporary fix into a permanent bureaucratic layer.
So it's a necessary short-term measure that immediately plugs the most dangerous gap for the highest value baggage. But it confirms the underlying systemic disease is still there.
Right. They've minimized the risk of another Dr. Vance incident. But the flaw itself is still there, waiting to impact a less influential but equally frustrated traveler.
It's prioritization based on fiscal value, plain and simple.
It is. So moving beyond the logistics of the baggage tracking, Section 4 of the meeting focuses on the human element and the policy failures. It starts with that initial customer service handling.
Right. The meeting addresses the specifics of the frontline interaction. Dr. Vance was initially offered what Catherine called an insulting offer of $150 for interim expenses.
And that single small action just amplified the feeling of incompetence and neglect exponentially.
Oh, absolutely.
Imagine being a top-tier customer, having your travel severely disrupted, and then being given this lowball figure that basically suggests the agent doesn't value your business or even understand your circumstances.
At that level, it's not about the money itself. It's about the perceived disrespect. The offer was a huge insult to injury.
And Mark correctly attributes this insulting offer not to malice on the part of the agent, but to a fundamental training failure.
And that failure has multiple layers, right?
It does. First, the agent on the ground was likely not adequately briefed on the discretionary authority they have when dealing with high-value customers during a severe IRO event.
They were just following the script?
Following the standard script. And second, they likely lacked immediate real-time context about Dr. Vance's status. The system failure went beyond just the baggage. It extended to customer recognition. The process was rigid exactly where it needed to be flexible, and that led to a standard, minimal, and insulting reimbursement offer.
This reveals a massive disconnect. The corporate strategy recognizes the value of these top-tier customers. That's why these loyalty tiers exist in the first place. But that crucial understanding hadn't successfully filtered down to the frontline employees.
The people representing the brand failed to execute the brand promise at the most critical moment.
It's because when agents feel constrained by rigid rules and they fear reprisal for exceeding standard reimbursement limits, they will always default to the lowest cost option.
And that results in customer fury. So the policy fix, therefore, it can't just be a reprimand for that agent. It has to be a systemic revision of both training and empowerment.
And so AA is rolling out a refreshed training module for all their baggage service agents. This is where the company attempts to fundamentally change its culture on the ground.
And this module targets two key areas, and the emphasis is critical.
Right.
The first is pretty obvious. Clarifying the reimbursement policies, making sure agents know the correct higher limits and guidelines for high-value customers, and how to recognize their tier instantly.
But you said there's a second area, and it's far more important.
It is. It's empowerment and proactivity.
Let's discuss that empowerment piece. Mark specifies the goal is to empower agents to escalate issues proactively, rather than waiting for a customer to demand it or, complain bitterly on Twitter. This is about flipping the script on the ground.
Proactive behavior versus reactive behavior. That is the defining line between a smooth operation and a crisis waiting to happen. Reactive behavior, waiting for the customer to get angry, waiting for a supervisor to intervene, waiting for a crisis to fully materialize, that is what creates these viral incidents.
So what does a proactive agent do in this scenario with this new training?
A proactive agent, armed with this new training, recognizes the severity of the IROP. They instantly identify the customer as concierge key, and they know that the required non-standard manual baggage transfer poses a high risk of failure.
So they see the problem coming.
They see the potential for a problem. And so they immediately escalate the issue to the newly established coordinator before the customer even have to ask about the location of the bag. They preempt the crisis.
But that requires not just new knowledge. It requires a total change in the incentive structure. Agents need to be rewarded for being proactive, not punished for spending more money up front on these high-value customers.
Absolutely. Cultural change is expensive, and it's difficult. It requires a real commitment from leadership to support agents who exercise this kind of discretion. If an agent gives a customer $500 for expenses and their supervisor later questions it, that agent will just revert to the minimal offer next time.
So the training has to come with a message from the top.
The refreshed training must include clear messaging from the very top that discretionary proactive spending on high-value customers is now a metric of success, not a cause for a punitive audit.
And Catherine summarizes the required cultural shift perfectly. She notes that the incident highlighted a dangerous complacency within the organization.
The belief that the old system was good enough because the cost of failure or fixing it was deemed prohibitive.
She says the mantra needs to change fundamentally. The organization needs to be proactive, not reactive.
And that single phrase encapsulates the entire purpose of the postmortem. It's a formal, forced mechanism for self-correction. It's about moving from a culture where deferred costs and operational silos lead to predictable failures toward a culture of immediate risk identification and decentralized empowerment.
They're using this incident to justify a necessary and probably painful cultural pivot that should have happened years ago.
Exactly. And with the action items set, the tactical coordinator pilot is drafted and the refresh training module is underway, the postmortem concludes. It transitions immediately from analysis into strategic implementation. The system, once static, is now moving rapidly to minimize any future exposure.
We've really covered a remarkable amount of ground here. We've gone from a simple lost baggage complaint all the way to a high-stakes discussion of global interoperability, organizational culture, technical debt, and financial risk mitigation.
Quite a journey.
Let's enter the final phase then and recap the key analytical takeaways from this very high-level discussion.
I think the primary takeaway for me is the power of analytical acumen and how that's demonstrated through the use of precise language. The discussion was so rich with professional terminology, interoperability issue, communication breakdown, prohibitive cost.
And that language wasn't just descriptive.
Not at all. It was used analytically to dissect the structural weakness of the entire system. And in doing so, it revealed the strategic decision-making, or lack thereof, that led directly to the failure.
We saw how these executives use precise terminology to dissect a complex systemic failure. They differentiate so clearly between the symptom, which was the lost bag, and the root cause, which was the siloed systems.
And identifying the single point of failure and recognizing the operational hazard of being siloed allowed them to create a very targeted, very focused fix.
And crucially, they used language to differentiate between short-term relief and long-term reform. That was demonstrated perfectly by Catherine when she labeled the solution a tactical patch to a much larger strategic problem.
That differentiation is so important. It clarifies the goals, it manages executive expectations, and critically, it maintains the pressure to eventually address that deeper systemic issue. It keeps it on the agenda.
The entire purpose of the postmortem, as we heard, was to transition the organization from reactive management, just scrambling to refund Dr. Vance, to proactive strategy, building in safeguards.
And this was exemplified by the twin solutions they came up with. The introduction of that human verification layer for critical operations to bypass the digital flaw, and the empowerment of frontline agents through refined training to manage the immediate customer fallout with dignity and with speed.
This is truly actionable knowledge for anyone in a high-stakes professional environment. Understanding these concepts allows you to participate in these kinds of strategy discussions with the rigor that's required at the highest levels of management.
Right. Knowing what SPOF means is one thing. Understanding the financial trade-off that allowed it to persist in a system for years is the truly valuable insight.
Absolutely. So this entire deep dive was triggered by one highly visible passenger, Dr. Vance. We know that the tactical fix they designed, that dedicated coordinator for manual verification, is specifically tailored for Concierge Key and 5-star members. They fixed the high-risk, high-value scenario.
They bought themselves time. They minimized the immediate, acute reputational risk that's associated with their premium market.
Which raises an extremely important question for you, the listener, to consider as you reflect on this and maybe apply this analytical framework to your own professional challenges. This whole discussion highlights the tension between, shareholder value and operational integrity.
So the question is this: what are the long-term strategic risks, and not just financial, but to brand integrity and organizational morale, of only solving a systemic failure for your top-tier customers and knowingly leaving the original single point of failure, those siloed, non-communicative digital systems, fully intact for everyone else?
Because that structural weakness is still there, it's waiting for the next mechanical failure to expose the problem all over again, but this time to the general population. So is this sustainable? Will the company ever truly commit to the prohibitive strategic fix, or will they just keep layering tactical solutions on top of a broken foundation until the entire architecture collapses?
A question to keep in mind. Thank you for joining us on The Deep Dive.
Until next time.